Hi, I'm Tom. I know you're German, but we're going to try this one more time. So it goes like this. I say, hi, I'm Tom, and then you say, hi, Tom. All right, you with me? Hi, I'm Tom. That's not bad, right? And welcome to SQL Server Audit and Threat Detection. This is a little presentation I put together. I actually put this together 10 years ago when SQL Audit first came out. I built a presentation around it. Because at the time, I felt security, privacy was kind of an important thing. I would be that DBA in the meeting saying, what about security? No, you don't need sysadmin. All those things, which at the time was just a general pain to everybody else around you because they didn't care about security. Fast forward 10 years, and all of a sudden, security is fairly important these days, yes? Would you agree? Is security one of the first things that your company actually talks about when it comes to data and design and architecture? Yeah. So I dusted off this presentation, and I said, OK, let me update it now that it's been a few years and it feels to be relevant again. However, what I found was that in that time, the SQL Server Audit feature inside of SQL Server has had no significant updates done to it in over 10 years. It's just been sitting there. So who uses SQL Server Audit today? Wow. You're the ones. That's about it. I think that's it for the entire world. And you're using it mostly for a security-related focus and feature? OK. Next thing, being Germany, I believe majority of people here are not yet using Azure. Is that correct? Yeah, so anybody here like not able to use Azure for one reason or another, just raise your hand so I know. Is it most of the room? So OK, about half. So half the room can use Azure. So a lot of the functionality I'm going to talk to you today is going to be in Azure because that's where it sits. It doesn't sit in the Earth product of SQL Server. And I can't change that. I can tell you that I believe Microsoft is working on bringing some of these features to the Earth product. So if you see some of the stuff I'm going to do today, you'll at least be familiar with it when it does, or if it does, come to the box version. All right. So a little bit about me. We already went through my name, so you know that. I've been working with data for about 20 years, and I do enjoy working with data, but probably too much to be healthy. And I sometimes tweet, I sometimes blog. I work for SolarWinds. If you'd like to know more about that, come talk to me. We make enterprise-class monitoring software for a company of any size, but I wanted to make sure people know that it's not just databases, applications, systems, networks. It is also we're getting into security, so threat detection, risk intelligence, things of that nature. So if you're interested, come talk to me. All right, so this is what we're going to do today. First, I'm going to go through some definitions of what audit is, make sure we all understand what it means one way or the other. Then I'm going to show you SQL Server Audit. Then we're going to look at auditing and advanced threat detection in Azure. And then I will take questions. Any questions? No, see, and that will be out of order. That comes after everything else. Right, no questions yet. Now, of course, if you have questions as I'm going through, feel free to raise your hand. All right, here's a hard truth. I believe, or I state, that data is the most critical asset that any company or person owns. Would somebody like to challenge that assertion? Do you believe there's something you have that's more valuable than your data? Your life? Data is your life. One and the same. I've had some people say, no, our assets are this, that, and the other. No, data. If you didn't have data, your company would not exist. It's that simple, right? Everything about your company is about your data. Therefore, it is the most valuable asset. And unfortunately, for decades, we did not treat it like that. And of course, in today's information economy, data is collected and stored and used and misused at an ever-increasing rate. And that's what's led to a whole bunch of things. I have up here I'm experienced enough to remember when GDPR was known as the General Data Direction or Protection Directive. I keep screwing it up anyway. But I remember back in the 90s, roughly, was when Europe started getting in front of general data protection and privacy. My country in the United States is many decades behind. I would love to have something equivalent to GDPR in my country, but we do not. What we do have are things like the HIPAA Act, Sarbanes-Oxley, and PCI standards. So over the years, we've made some definitions of what it means for data to be private. But we don't have a whole lot of legislation around what it means for a company or a person to actually have an expectation of privacy. Matter of fact, we almost have the opposite in my country. We have an expectation of no privacy whatsoever. So this is where we're at with a lot of these acts that have come up as a result of the misuse of data over time. So we also have the concept of an audit, something that's been around for a while, but in tech, the last 20 years or so, auditors used to kind of focus more on the accounting side. Now they also focus on the information technology side. As defined in ISO 1911-2011, of course, you don't need me to tell you what an audit is: the systematic, independent, documented process for obtaining audit evidence and evaluating it objectively to determine the extent to which the audit criteria are fulfilled. So I've underlined audit evidence and audit criteria. Who defines audit evidence? Who defines audit criteria? Anyone know? Anyone want to guess? So the answer is, you do. Your auditor defines what is considered evidence and audit criteria. Your auditors are the ones that decide, and your lawyers, they decide what is, how to gauge risk, what they would consider to be evidence to suffice for an audit and to satisfy the criteria for the collection for the evidence. So they get to define that. If they get to define that, that means you're also part of the discussion, or at least you should be. So go back about 15 years. I think 2005 was when login-less users became a thing. Has anybody ever used a login-less user in SQL Server? Have you ever tried to trace the permissions for that log? So somebody logs in with a login-less user, and somebody says, what access do they have? Do you remember back in 2005? You were like, it's... Okay. Well, for me, is it FN help permissions or SP permissions or whatever it was, whatever that system store procedure that would work normally for everything else, once you first pointed the login-less user at it, it basically came back and said, no, I have no idea. That was my answer to the auditors. I'm like, no, I have no idea. They didn't like that answer. They didn't like that answer at all, but I'm like, I didn't design this. If somebody had been designing this, I could have at least done a quick test and figure it out, and now we had to go through and I had to supply a little bit more information than anybody really wanted to, and that developer didn't like the idea that he was actually on the hook because he insisted on using that piece of architecture. So the point being, you should be part of the conversation. What does it mean to have audit evidence? What does the audit criteria mean? So somebody understands when they just say, hey, we're going to go do this thing, okay, that's going to affect us in these areas. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. Let's just all be aware of what the work is actually going to be involved. So the general definition of an audit is simply an evaluation of a person, organization, system, process, enterprise, project, or product. In this talk, I focus on a system. I focus on SQL Server itself, or the data inside of SQL Server. So data is everywhere. We are tasked, right, to helping find or deploy auditing solutions that are part of your overall governance and data security strategy. At a minimum, so for the people using SQL Audit, I'm assuming that you've probably built your own homegrown security or auditing system. Is that true? Anybody here, so has anybody here bought a system to handle all the auditing, like a Guardium? I think Guardium still exists from IBM. Nobody here has bought a system? Okay, as an aside, I know a company that can help you with that. But you're all rolled your own security and auditing system at this point? Has that been kind of painful? Does it ever break? Not collect the right thing? Yeah, I see some heads going, yeah, pretty much. So if you want an auditing solution, this is what it has to do. It has to be able to detect access, recreate events, track configuration changes, audit the auditor. So who here right now in their security system, are you tracking configuration changes? Yes, one person. Another person saying no. So not everybody. Tracking configuration changes is a huge part of this, right? Can you detect all access? Probably. You're probably tracking maybe successful logins for that. Is that enough? I don't know. Depends on how people are connecting. Can you recreate events if somebody has accessed your system? Can you recreate and say, I know what they did. They did this and this and this. Is that an easy thing for you to do, or would it be hard? Right? The configuration changes. And then most importantly, audit the auditor. If you've built the system, you are essentially the auditor for that system. Who's watching what you do? How do we know that you didn't just decide to clean up after yourself? Delete records. Maybe Anton in accounting decided that, hey, buddy, can you do me a favor? At noon, I did a couple of things. Can you just delete that from the log? How do we know that's not happening? So these are, God, what's the standards? National Institute for Standards for cybersecurity have identified these, or have listed these 5 things for any auditing system. You are data security protection. Identify, you have to be able to identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. So in conjunction with, if you're going to build an auditing solution, I want you to remember those 5 words, because whatever you're doing has to also fit or fulfill those 5 words on the right. I kind of assume that between detect access, recreating events, track configuration, if you're doing those things, you can do identify, protect, detect. Respond might be a different team, a different security team, and recover. If you are database administrators, developers, you probably have the ability to recover. So these are the terms I want you to walk away from today and have a familiarity with. So I'm going to jump into SQL Server Audit and make sure you all understand what it looks like where it is. So introduced with SQL Server 2008 was this little feature called SQL Server Audit. Now, the problem with SQL Server Audit, and let me pull up a database real quick. I find it easier to kind of explain things this way. So you see, I'll just draw lines. Database audit specifications, server audit specifications, and then this thing just called audit. So they've overused the term audit specification and audit. They use it 3 times, so it gets confusing, but it's essentially like this. What says audits, right? That's just your log file. If that folder had said audit logs, a lot of confusion would go away. That is your kitchen sink. That is where all of the audit information gets sent to. You can have many audits, or just think of it, logs. You can have many log files, right? You don't need just one, you can have many. So if you wanted one database to write to one specific log file, you can do that. So audits, just think of it as an audit log. Now, specifications. Server audit specifications, that is for the instance. I need to know who shut down the instance. Then you would find that audit specification inside the server audit specification. You would configure that. You will tie it to one of your audit logs. Simple enough. Database audit specifications. There might be something you want specific to a database. I want to know who's selecting or updating this specific table in my database. That is a database audit specification. Again, you would create that, tie it to an audit log. With the use of these terms, it got confusing, and like specifications, audits, they just kept reusing the same words, and sometimes can't make sense of it. So what I've done here is I've set up a couple. I had a few here. I've got one that I'm just going to call SQL Agent Job, and I'll show you what it does. So when you create it, you'll give it a name. There'll be a queue delay in milliseconds. That's basically, think of it as asynchronous logging. I don't know. I guess that's the best way to put it. You will allow up to 1,000 milliseconds of data to be collected and and allow for 1,000 milliseconds of latency for the audit log to acknowledge that it wrote the information to the log file. On audit log failure, what can it do? Well, it can continue, shut down, or fail operation. Who here has ever used the old C2 auditing in SQL Server? One person. Did your server ever shut down? Yes? No? Yeah, it did, right. So the old SQL Server C2 auditing, common criteria auditing, Department of Defense level auditing. Yeah, so if I can't log any more activity, stop all activity and shut the instance down. Isn't that fun? That is a wonderful way to walk into work one morning when the trading system's down because somebody decided C2 auditing had to be, remember I said you should be involved in those discussions when somebody says, what's the audit evidence and the criteria and all that? If somebody had come to me and said, C2 has to be enabled, I might have said, you just know that we could shut down the server if we fill up a log file. Then we could talk about, hey, server team, let's make sure we never fill up that log file. Well, anyway, that didn't happen. So yes, that is what those features are as well. So here, I can do the same thing. I can say, hey, look, when I'm logging activity, if I can't write to that log file, what should I do? Should I just keep going? Should I fail? Should I shut down the server? All right. So the audit destination, I've chosen file. You can also choose the event logs. You can choose a file on a network share if you wanted to. I would tell you writing to the event logs might be the best way to go. However, is that perfect? Who here is a Windows admin? Yay, so you can just reset that log anytime you want, right? Who's auditing the auditor? By the way, the security, the system security, those logs, they get overwritten at some point. At some point, Windows says, oh, you know what? I've hit a point where I'm just going to go back to the beginning and start overwriting things. These are things you find out when you start using SQL Server Audit and information disappears. And you're like, who erased the log? I didn't erase, nobody erased the log. Windows started overwriting the log. Or you find out that a network admin just decided to delete some logs because he thought it might free up some space. I don't know. I guess you're allowed to do that? I would think you wouldn't be allowed to do that. I would think Windows would say, no, I've written this to a log file, a security log file, don't ever touch it. But that is not the case. So be mindful of your audit destination. I've chosen a path, I've chosen rollover files, and I want it to grow forever. All right. So now I can create, this log file, any specification, I can create many specifications to write to this log file, but a specification can only write to one log file. So many specifications can go to this audit log file, but it's a one-to-one. I can't have a specification. I can't be like, hey, look, track these database events and write to these 10 different places. Nope, you write to one place. So I decided for things to audit, I thought I'd have some fun. Who here has ever had a SQL agent job just sort of change? No one? You know what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to stop this real quick. Disable. I can't even read because I want to show you. All right. So this is what that looks like. So what I have here is I've set up an audit on the sysjobs table. So anytime you make a change to a SQL agent job, if you're doing it through the GUI, it's going to hit a handful of store procedures. And SP start job, SP update job, right? All of those store procedures all end up essentially modifying the sysjobs table. So what I've done is I've set up an audit on that table. Because I don't have to use the store procedures, I could just update those tables directly if I had that level of access. So I've created this, and I say the audit action type, delete, insert, update on an object of DBO, sysjobs, principal name DBO. So now I'm going to be able to capture any time a job is created, deleted, updated. Has anybody here had a job just suddenly change on them? Something goes wrong, they want to know what's, yeah. So I thought that would be useful. What I wanted to show, though, by disabling it, I can actually show you more about the options available. So if you were looking to do, I don't know, let's say you wanted to I'm failing at thinking of an example. I apologize. But the point of the list is I want you to feel slightly overwhelmed as to which one of those do I want. So you're trying to do a very specific task. Actually, a simple example, what I have here, delete, insert, and update. If you notice, I had to choose the object class. I said object. I can show you what the other classes are. The schema, so you have to know that. I had to know the object name itself, and then the principal name has who they're logging in as. In this case, it's going to be DBO. But let's just say you don't know who they're logging in as. So the point of this screen and this drop-down right here is to help you understand that SQL Server Audit, as designed in that GUI, was not designed by a person that actually was going to sit down and use it to do daily tasks. It was designed by some developer to which this monstrosity made sense. Is this a user-friendly for the people using it? Is this a user-friendly item for you? No. And I think this is one of the reasons SQL Server Audit never really got a lot of traction, because in order to figure out how to even use the thing, there was a steep learning curve. You were like, I got a simple thing. I just want to know who's selecting from this table. Well, to do that, you're going to have to add an action type of select from that table, and you're going to have to add in that principal name for every principal, unless they're logging in and they're a member of DBO, in which case you could just do that. But if they're logging in directly, it becomes a nightmare. It becomes a lot more administrative overhead than what you would really want. So the object classes, database object or schema, and so on and so forth. So it just wasn't very friendly. Now, I had to disable that in order to make it work, or in order to make edits. So I just re-enabled it. Now, if I come down here to my jobs, let's just go into this new job, and I will update description one more time, SQL Conference. Never type in the demo. I'll say OK. And now, when I come over to my audits, and I have this audit, that SQL agent job, I can right-click. If I view the audit log, I'll see at the top here, so I see that update's 1:38. Is that about the time right now? 2:39? Yeah, close. No, 13:38 event time, yeah. And I can see down here, where'd it go? Oh, sorry. Let me come down a little bit more. Update job, it's in there somewhere. Where's the text? It's right in front of me, I know it is, right? I ran update job, DBO. I could have sworn the text was there. Oh, 3 lines higher, thank you. Ah. I swear it's in here somewhere, or I just missed it. Well, how about I do this, since I've run this before. Database name, add job step. Well, here, I added the job step, so that's a good example, too. So if somebody's come in, they've changed the job step. You can see in the parameters for this store procedure as well, I added myself a job step. So I can track the activity for my SQL agent jobs. I'll know who had done what. So to me, that has value as an administrator. So for the administrators out there, you can do all sorts of stuff with SQL Server Audit that I don't think a lot of people tend to apply to. So things like tracking changes to SQL agent, tracking changes at the instance level itself, link server changes. Has that ever happened to you? Somebody's updated the link server, log in, things start failing. You can track a lot of that information if you know where to find the right stuff inside of SQL Audit. However, that's not as easy as it should be. So back to the slides real quick. So I've shown you the Earth version. We're going to flip over to do Azure. And what I want you to see right here on this screen, remember that drop-down list? Here's essentially the drop-down list in Azure. Here is every group that is included. Now, I've got a few of these highlighted. I got those colored, and then I've got a couple you can't really see. Maybe you can see. So I've got a star, and a star. See the stars? When you're in Azure and you enable auditing, those three are what you get by default. Okay? So batch complete, successful failed login, successful login. That's essentially what I bet a lot of people are doing right now for their auditing of SQL Server. You're probably capturing failed logins or successful and failed logins. You're probably using audit for something else. So batch completed group. Where do you usually see that term, batch completed group? What tool? Profiler. That's interesting. So Profiler was built to do performance and security. Matter of fact, they have a whole thing that's just security class, right? You know what that security class really is? Everything that C2 auditing does. That's what that security class is. So when you enable C2 auditing, it's just saying, oh, I know what to do because I get all the security events that have already been defined. And of course, that means they're logging everything, which is why your log will fill up and, and cause a production outage at the worst possible moment. So Azure, instead of thinking to themselves, let's just track everything, they're only going to do a few things by default. Successful, failed logins, and there's a batch that's been completed. That's what you get out of the box. All these others, you can enable, but you have to use PowerShell. If you're afraid of PowerShell, I'm sorry. Find somebody not afraid of PowerShell. But using PowerShell, you can then enable any one of these other ones. Now, I've got those two up there colored because what I want you to understand, you see all that list, right? Oh, I had my clicker here. A database specification, audit action group, that long list. It's everything from that first slide minus batch started, batch completed. And why would SQL Audit not have batch started, batch completed? Because if you want that, you would use Profiler. But we're talking about Azure. Azure is something different. Azure's better. So a database audit specification doesn't do batch started and batch completed, but it does everything else on that first slide plus these 6 things. And these 6 things you don't need if you're using Azure SQL Database. So basically, everything that's in Azure SQL Audit is all the stuff you need. And remember, they only do 3 things by default, which is usually the 3 things that are good enough, and they give you the ability to do all those other ones. Then there's, let's see, the server specification audit action groups. This is everything you get. You basically get all the database specification groups plus all of the following. But again, a lot of this stuff aren't things that you're going to need inside of Azure. All right. So I'm going to do a few more slides, and we're going to go back and we're going to finish most of the day in the demo. I wanted to talk about advanced threat detection. And notice how I say it's only available in Azure today. I believe in my heart Microsoft is going to find a way to bring a lot of this functionality to the Earth version. So right now, inside of advanced threat detection, you're going to get protection from these 5 things: SQL injection vulnerability, data exfiltration, unsafe action, anomalous client login. So the difference between SQL injection vulnerability, advanced threat detection can identify if your code is susceptible to possible SQL injection attacks. Azure can also tell you if you are actively under attack. So is there attack happening right now? That's one thing. Is it possible you could be attacked? That's a different thing. You get protection from both. Who here right now is actively protecting themselves from SQL injection? Do you know? Like one person, because you're using this? If you're not using this. Who is? Because he's looking at his code. Okay, I had somebody else the other day say their code only uses parameters, but would you know if somebody's trying to attack you? You wouldn't know if somebody's trying to attack you. But you're writing your code, you're one step ahead of most people. You're aware of it, you're writing, was it you, Georgie? Yeah, you're at least aware of it, you're writing your code to only be parameter, and that's great. The other one, data exfiltration. Yes? I'm not sure. Are you asking about CLR? You said safe, so I couldn't understand if you were asking me about CLR code or.
If I can enable both injection and injection vulnerability.
Yeah. Okay.
Vulnerability says your code is safe. With an attempt from outside, it can still be.
Okay. So the question is, if my code is, if there's no injection vulnerability detected because the code is safe, would injection attack still trigger an alert? And the answer is yes. Data exfiltration. A high volume of data is extracted. Guess what? They don't ever tell me what high volume means. I have no idea. I think there's some machine learning under the hood. I've thought about, like, maybe I could try to test to see when to trigger it, but I keep thinking if it is machine learning and the more I'm running it, the more the machine's going to expect somebody to be extracting this data. So I'm not even sure how to test. But it seems to me that if one day somebody just runs a select and tries to grab as much data as they can out of your database, and Azure says, hey, I've never seen that before, you're going to get an alert. Unsafe action. So brute force attacks, if somebody runs a penetration test, which we're actually going to see, and if malware, if it looks like it might be some known malware that's trying to get into your Azure SQL database, that's what they consider to be unsafe. So they're going to tell you about that. And of course, there's anomalous client login as well. And that's based on a handful of factors. I think we've all seen that from Microsoft at one time or another. I don't recognize this device, and now they send you a code to make sure you are who you say you are. So if you had to protect your server right now, your database, from SQL injection, and knowing that it takes a lot of code rewrite, but how about just being actively proactive if somebody's trying to run an attack against you? Just think for a second, how much would that cost you? In time and money, how much effort would it take for you to be protected? So think about that for a second. And now I want you to remember this number. It's 15. 15 American dollars per instance of Azure SQL Server per month. It's 180 US dollars on the year per instance for you to be protected for SQL injection. SQL injection is the #1 attack on any public-facing website. Okay? It is the #1 way that somebody is going to get access to data you didn't even know existed or was available. And for $15 a month, you could be protected. So if you're not on Azure, I'd find a way to get there. Yes, sir? Yeah. Why don't we find out? The question is, how good is the detection? Let's find out. You know, it's almost like I needed you to say that at that moment, Hugo. I have here a little website that's just called Contoso Clinic, okay? And wouldn't you know, Contoso Clinic as a public-facing website, what do you think of the data that the Contoso Clinic is revealing for the entire world to see? Would you, if this was your company, how would you feel about this? Yeah, I mean, right? I can go to visits. I can see people who they visited for a headache. I mean, so I've got medical history possibly available in this website. You would shut down the server. That would protect it. So let's do a few things here. I want to show some of the functionality. So here is the SQL database itself, right? Let me make sure. There. Here's the SQL database that's actually powering that clinic database. And over in the security section, I've got a handful of things I'll talk to just real quick. So transparent data encryption, that's on by default for all your Azure SQL databases. So nobody's going to come into an Azure data center, take files, bring it somewhere else. It's just default now. You don't have to worry about that. Dynamic data masking is a good feature that would have protected some of the data on that website from the public-facing website, right? It's better than nothing. The other thing, auditing. I'm going to do auditing, and then we're going to do advanced data security. So remember how bad it was for auditing inside of SQL Server GUI? Here's how you turn on auditing inside of Azure. There's this button right there, and it's either on or off. And when I turn it on, I get those 3 default groups: batch completed, successful login, failed login. That's your $15 a month. I'm sorry, $15 a month was for advanced threat detection. Auditing is different, sorry. But auditing, that's what you get by default. And then I can write the logs to a specific storage container, or I could push it to Log Analytics, Event Hub. There's a lot of, say, opportunities for you to do what you want with your audit logs. Push them wherever you need them to go. But this is it. Now, this also says server-level auditing is enabled. If I've enabled auditing at the server level, every database that is created afterwards will have auditing by default, okay? If you already have databases, you can turn it on for the server, but you may need to go back and make sure it's enabled for all the databases as well. What you don't want to do is enable it for both, because if you enable at the server and at the database, which is possible, you could do that if you really want to, but you end up writing the same events twice. And they basically say there's no need for you to double the storage and the costs. So just be mindful of that. But if for existing instances, depending on when they were created and what data center you're in, it's possible that you could turn it on for the server and have a database that just doesn't actually have it, so double check. So that is how you turn it on. And then you get, this is how you view the logs. Database authentication succeeded. I get information, the IP address. Here's a batch completed. I can see the statement that was run. I mean, I got that out of the box. I didn't have to worry about schemas. I didn't have to worry about which action group, none of that. I captured basically the best of both worlds. A little bit of security, a little bit of performance in terms of the old profiler with batch completed, right? It's a thing of beauty if you ask me. All right, that's audit. So audit's on and running for us, that's great. Here's advanced data security. I've enabled this. Oh, before I forget, there's a concept of vulnerability assessment. I've turned that on for here. In case you didn't know that, back inside of SQL Server, there's also a task and a vulnerability assessment, and I can do a scan for vulnerabilities. So if you're running version Management Studio 17.3 or higher, you can do a vulnerability scan. If I do a vulnerability scan, it comes back and it looks like this. And it does a total, in this case, 54 checks. I had 5 that errored. You will judge for yourself if the error is really an error for your environment. You can set baselines. You can tell it to skip that next time if you want. Here's something, though. Buried down in here is a list of columns that they will say, hey, here's something I've detected. It's a column. Here's the table. Here's the column. Here's the type of information I think it contains. You might want to use something like masking or always encrypted in order to protect this data. That functionality is also over here inside of Azure SQL Database. So it's doing the same type of checks, okay? But I wanted to make sure I mentioned that because it's a feature that you can take advantage of. So over here, I have advanced data security. Here are the settings. Again, it's a big button. I've turned it on. This is actually, they put vulnerability assessment into here as well. Here's the advanced threat protection settings. Here's where I would go and I would say, well, what do I want protection for? In this case, I'm going to protect against everything. Again, the storage, I write to this particular storage account, and we can save it, and we're off and running. So let's go back to this website. So this website comes with a few hints by default. You can run some SQL injection. I ran a simple statement that said convert the version number to an integer, which, as a hacker, I know will generate an error. And if they haven't protected the website, it's going to generate a really helpful error for me, because it's going to tell me the exact version of SQL Server. I could not convert 12 point whatever into an integer for you. And I say, thank you. Now I know what version of SQL Server we're talking to. Now, these are very simple SQL injection attacks. I can come over here. Let's try this one. What does this give me? Look at that. It gave me, in the first row, before patients, it gave me a name of patients, migration history, application user patient. It just gave me a list of all the tables in my database, including one at the end here. Ooh, that looks good. I now know that I have a table in this database called credit cards. So now, I might use a tool like SQL Map. If you're not familiar with SQL Map, you should be. SQL Map is a wonderful tool to help you do some penetration testing against a website. SQL Map is not database specific, it's database agnostic, actually. You can just point it at the website, and it will run tests until it figures out what database is behind there, if it can. And then it says, great, for that database, I have a whole bunch of test cases in order to figure out if there's SQL injection, if these pages are susceptible to SQL injection, and then I'll get those error messages, and eventually I will get to enumerate the data inside of those tables. So in our case, I say, you know what? I don't want all the data right now. All I really want are those juicy credit card numbers. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run this statement. So it's a Python script, and I'm going to go specifically and try to get the credit card data. So I run this, and it just takes a few seconds. For the students that were in my class on Tuesday, you remember that it kind of started to time out, and I was like, why is this taking so long? Guess what? Because I had run it while I had done data masking on the data, SQL Map was like, I know the code is susceptible to injection, but I'm not getting any data back. All I'm getting back are these asterisks. So it kept moving on to the next test. So I got no data out, which I thought was weird. So I have to go back to the SQL Map thing and try to figure out how if that is the way it's supposed to work or not. But look what this did for me. I got a nice little output of those credit cards. It's also been written to a CSV file, because export to CSV is the greatest thing in data anyway. So that's what this tool does. It exports the CSV for you. Doesn't it say it right there? It says it somewhere. I can find the results in multiple. Yeah, there it is. Results, CSV. Mail that to all your friends and go shopping. All right. Now, here's, if I've done this right, what time is it? On my machine, 9 o'clock. Look at that. I got myself an email I generated just now as I was running that SQL Map test. My clinic, this might be from the first SQL injection things I did inside the browser. Either way, I generated this message right now. So who here right now, if you were under attack, would have an email alert within 5 minutes? I'm guessing nobody. Who here would like to be notified within 5 minutes? Yeah, really? There's somebody not raising your hand? You just want the work? I don't get it. So from breach to time of detection of breach is anywhere from 90 to 270 days, depending on the industry you're in. 90 days before you would know that somebody had used SQL injection to grab some of your company's data and walk away with it. Does that sound like a good thing? I don't think it's good. I'd rather have at least an email within 5 minutes to at least know somebody's trying something. Remember the part of identify, protect, detect, respond? If you're into cybersecurity, you know that sometimes the best response isn't to shut that person out right away. Sometimes you need to know that they're there, and then you have to watch them and say, okay, what are they doing, and how are they doing it? Because then you get to learn about the holes in your environment, and then you can plug them. I know, it's a whole red team, blue team thing. It's like real spy stuff. But if I get an email within 5 minutes and I can notify a security team and they can go, yep, we'll watch them, we'll track. And if they get access to something they shouldn't have access to, maybe we shut them out then. But if they're just probing the network, let's see what they're doing, because now they're essentially, they're working for you. Well, let's see what they're exploiting, and then we'll go fix those holes. So, I've got the emails. So Hugo, you had the question about how effective this was. Am I getting close to answering that? Okay. So follow-up question, sir. So how good is it at learning over time? And so false positives, false negatives, that I don't know. I haven't used it for a long enough time, and I don't have any research to share on that. That is a great question, though. You know who's here is Andreas. So we can talk to Andreas about that and find out if he has information. Something else I wanted to show. You can, the data is available. Those audit logs that are written to the Azure storage, somebody at Microsoft built a little PowerPoint dashboard that can just go and get the information so you can pull it into Power BI, right? Sounds great. So I'm showing you what that looks like. It's not that exciting, right? There's a couple of bar charts. There's, object names. There's the queries. But I mean, this is the stuff that you're going to pull out. I found it to not be as useful, so I built myself my own little pie chart, donut chart. And I just said, here's the report you need to know. How many times has your data been stolen and sold on the dark web? So you can get access to the data to do anything you want with it. It's very easy to do that. It's a simple query against a storage account. What else? Oh, this is it. I think I've got about 10 minutes. Oh, this doesn't want to work anymore. Well, nothing wants to work now. So this is what I had promised that we would walk through a little bit today. So we would talk a little bit about audit. We would look at audit in Azure, advanced threat detection, and questions. Here's a slide if you want to take a picture. This is reference material for everything in this talk. I think audit groups and actions is the one where if you go there, one of the lower sections in that page actually has a link that gets you out to the page that talks about the PowerShell code needed in order to enable the other groups inside of Azure. Let's see. It is time for questions, but I want to leave the QR code up there for you as well. So I am ready for your questions at this time. We've got about maybe just under 10 minutes left. Oh, sir, I finally saw you. Sorry. Hold on. Now I can really see you. So the question is there a way to migrate your existing SQL audit into Azure? There's no button I know of that Microsoft has built. So I would go back to you and say, you need to know what audit actions you have, because whatever audit actions you have exist in Azure, right? Because there's no way you're in audit and you're using the batch completed group. So whatever you're using for your audit action groups must exist in Azure. So then for you to build would be a way to just say, okay, go identify the groups and then script out the PowerShell to say, okay, we're going to enable auditing, and now I need to turn on these other particular audit action groups. But there's no button that I know of for Microsoft to say, let me point at yours, and yeah. That would be a wonderful feature request. Are you familiar with Microsoft's use of user voice? Yeah. That's where you're going to go next. But that would be a good feature request. Other questions, comments, concerns? Y'all tired. It's afternoon. You know what, Tom? It's good. Just let us go. You're not a hostage. You can go. All right. Thank you for your time today. I appreciate it. Great being here again.